Woman, an in-depth exploration of the world of women today with Sandra Elkin.
Good evening and welcome to Woman. Tonight we're going to be talking about breast cancer controversies. My guest is Rose Kushner, author of Breast Cancer, A Personal History and Investigative Report. Rose had a mastectomy recently. Welcome to Woman, Rose.
Thank you.
Rose, we get a lot of advice about what to do about breast cancer. Do you think that the advice we're getting is adequate?
Well, as far as I know, we're getting instructions in breast self-examination which always end with, if you find anything, call your family doctor. If you call that advice, that's fine. I call it just a helpful hint. Your family doctor may be the last person you should call. Certainly your gynecologist is the last person you should call, but in the United States, most women take their breasts to a gynecologist, although they are trained to treat the reproductive organs. No instructions that I have ever seen tell you to go to an oncologist, a cancer specialist. No instruction that I have ever seen tells a woman where to find one. More basic than that, I think that women should be told that they should be slippery when they do examine themselves, because in my case I would not have found my lump if I had not been slippery from soap.
What? Oh, slippery from soap.
Yeah, but baby oil or suntan oil, any kind of an oil. I think that any woman that's put cream on her face is aware of the fact that a perfectly smooth and flawless skin suddenly feels like a mountain range when the fingertips are greasy, and that goes for lumps in the breast as well. Also, there are other symptoms of breast cancer besides a lump, and I think women should be made aware that any change of skin texture, any kind of flaking, any discharge from the nipples, any puckering or dimpling that is unilateral and not in both breasts should be reported, not to a gynecologist. If a woman feels foolish going to an oncologist for just a preliminary diagnosis, at least go to an internist, a specialist in internal medicine, not to a gynecologist.
Don't most women go to gynecologists, though?
In this country, but not in other countries I've been to. As a matter of fact, it's sort of a joke in other countries that American women take breasts to a gynecologist. Gynecologist is trained to treat the reproductive organs. The breast is just not a reproductive organ. That's all.
I know you've traveled to Japan, Canada, Sweden.
Yeah, England, Scotland, Finland, and the Soviet Union.
So you must have a very good idea of the status of breast cancer research, both here and abroad.
Well, I can't really say abroad because I didn't go to the continent. My main motive in going to Europe at all last year for the book was to see if breast cancer is treated differently in countries where there's a larger percentage of women in the treatment of breast cancer, and where medicine is nationalized and you don't have the American fee-for-service system. And that's why I didn't go to the continent, because they're pretty much the way we are here. There is a big difference where medicine is nationalized, and the biggest difference is that general practitioners, family doctors, are not so anxious to keep hold of a cancer patient, either voluntarily or in some cases by law. In the Soviet Union, I was told it is the law. No general practitioner is permitted to deal with cancer of any kind. But in the case of breast cancer, if a woman appears in his or her office with what might be a symptom of breast cancer, she is immediately referred to an oncologist. And because of this, even though their advances, their technology, their chemotherapies and so on are not as sophisticated as ours, their survival rates are really not lower. We are offset in this country because so many of our, 90% it is estimated, of American cancer patients, all cancers, are treated by family doctors or general surgeons until they decide that it's more than they can handle, and then they are turned over to oncologists.
So are American women getting the best cancer care, breast cancer care?
I don't think so, and I think it's for that reason. We could. The survival rates that are often quoted too often quoted are that a woman who has developed breast cancer has a 50-50 chance of living for 10 years. But this includes women who never get any treatment at all, never go to a doctor, and die of breast cancer. It includes women who go to a doctor but too late to be helped by anything. It includes women who go to a doctor early enough but get very bad treatment, and that unfortunately is too often. And it applies to women like me who have what I consider to be the very best, and that's at the Roswell Park Memorial Institute, which is the oldest cancer hospital in the world. I am confident that if only this group, not just breast cancer, all cancers, if only this group were measured, the survival rates would be infinitely higher in this country.
So then it's really much more hopeful than we think.
I think so.
I mean, the statistics scare us to death.
Well, it's like taking traffic fatalities and including people who drive while drunk and at 100 miles an hour, people who drive while drunk but keep at the maximum safe speed, and going all the way down to the law-abiding citizen who never drinks at all. And naturally, the person who drives 100 miles an hour while he's drunk has a greater chance of dying behind the wheel than the person who drives carefully. But if you look at the overall rates, it looks terrible, because they skew it. And this is what I think has happened in the United States. Unfortunately, general surgeons who are trained to cut and to take out the stitches and then should turn a cancer patient over to an oncologist are giving chemotherapy, are ordering irradiation, are managing all cancers and breast cancer, which is a very bizarre and unpredictable disease at best. And they're managing it until they decide that it's beyond them. I have so many examples of mistreatment. I'll leave out the word malpractice because that's a no-no. But let's say mistreatment by general surgeons and general practitioners because they simply do not know what they do not know. It's a combination of arrogance, it's a combination of ignorance, and there's also a lot of economic incentive in it, and that's why I went to Europe. I am convinced that the nationalization of medicine has gotten rid of this. It would be unthinkable in England, where it is voluntary for a general practitioner. Even the Harley Street doctors turn their patients over to the cancer center.
There's also another thing, and that is women just don't know enough.
Well, that's why I wrote the book, because when I needed the information, it wasn't there. And I had to go to a medical library, the National Library of Medicine and the Library of the National Institutes of Health, to dig out all the information, not including the research I did in terms of personal interviews with the people here and in other countries. It's there, but it's not written for women to read. But it's really got nothing to do with the fact that nobody will publish it or that nobody will write it. What I'm discovering is nobody wants to read it. And this
I have an admission to make here. I circled the book for a day. I mean, I just looked at it, and I opened it a little ways, and then I closed it. And I thought, I know I have to read this book, but I really don't want to.
Yeah. Well, I don't understand it. It's been quite an education for me.
Well, you've had the experience. It's less fearful for you. I mean, most women have not had the experience, and it's terrifying.
But why aren't you as afraid of heart disease? It's far more prevalent. Nobody has ever keeled over suddenly out of the clear blue sky from cancer, but they do from stroke, they do from high blood pressure, they do from coronaries. Why aren't people afraid to carry around a book or read a book that's about heart trouble?
But I think we misunderstand. I think we're led to believe it means instant death. It means certain death.
Well, I must agree with you, simply because it's a fact. It's the first step of what in the jargon is called denial. Whatever it is that prevents a woman from examining herself, whatever mechanism it is that keeps her from going to the doctor and waiting too long because she knows it's going to go away, is the same mechanism that keeps a woman from opening the book. I think, and this is just an opinion that I've come to without anything more than just superficial thinking, I think possibly there has been too much emphasis on the importance of early detection, in the sense that it leaves the implication that if you haven't caught it early, you better forget it.
And that's not true?
No, no. Most diseases are not curable. Arthritis is not curable, diabetes is not curable, you name it, unless it's infectious, it is not curable. And most of the time we don't know the cause either. It is controllable. Diabetics would die without insulin. And cancer patients sometimes have to take chemotherapy, which is insulin is chemotherapy. What else is it? It's just not called chemotherapy, so it doesn't sound as frightening. But if you said a person has to get L-PAM, which is what Mrs. Ford is getting, doesn't sound so terrible. Chemotherapy sounds awful.
Well, it sounds like you're going to die is what it sounds like.
We're all going to die. The question is when. And you don't, granted, it is, if you find it early, any cancer, but breast cancer, if you find it very early, and early means it's got to be less than 1 centimeter or 2 at most, and it's got to be without any involvement of the axillary lymph nodes or the glands in the armpit, you've got a chance for cure. You've got a 90% chance that you will live as long as you would have lived without it. The other 10% is that a stray cell broke off and formed a colony by the bloodstream, but that's cure. But as I say, most diseases cannot be cured.
I must tell you that once
control.
I did open the book, and begin to read, I was very grateful that I was getting knowledge that I had never had before.
Well, thank you. I wrote it primarily for women not as a preventative, because nothing prevents breast cancer, but as a way to cope with the problem if it should arise. But in advance, I have discovered from mail and from talking to women that most of the books have gone to women who have already had a mastectomy. Unfortunately, this is a pool of women that is large enough to ensure very, very good sales and make the publisher very happy, and my husband too. There are estimated 677,000 women alive in this country who have had 1 or 2 mastectomies. There has not been enough emphasis on the long-term survivors.
I've never heard that statistic before.
Yeah. 677,000 is the number. Where are they? A lot of them came out of the closet, like Julia Childs. It came out after Mrs. Ford and Mrs. Rockefeller made it fashionable or not a taboo subject anymore. And this is something I think that Mrs. Ford and Mrs. Rockefeller had not been given enough credit for. By publicizing the fact that they have cancer, they brought these long-term survivors out for public view. And as a mastectomy, I can tell you, I never knew a long-term survivor except Alice Roosevelt Longworth. And she's a legend, so she really didn't count. Everybody I knew that had breast cancer died simply because the women who survived hid and never talked about it. And this is a major contribution that these 2 women made, as well as Marvella Bai and Shirley Temple Black, but because of their lesser rank, it didn't make as much of an impact in terms of the front page.
There's another thing, Rose, that's kind of peculiarly American, isn't it? And that is the surgical biopsy.
Yeah, well, it's changing.
Maybe not the surgical biopsy, but the
in-hospital biopsy.
Right.
Yes, and this is, again, I think, a matter of nationalized medicine, where people are very aware of hospital costs. They are parsimonious, it's the nicest word I can think of, when it comes to putting you in the hospital. Now, in the case of my biopsy, which was an inpatient biopsy in the hospital, I didn't know then what I know now.
Which is what?
I went into the hospital late afternoon one day. I spent the night. The following day, the lump was removed. I had to pay for the room. My surgeon cost $230 just for his 20 minutes worth of work. And he didn't even take out the stitches. If he had taken out the stitches, it would have been another $15. I had to pay for an anesthesiologist, the operating room, the recovery room. And I didn't pay, the insurance company paid, but that little biopsy wound up costing the insurance company almost $1,000. Whereas the surgeon, had he done it as an outpatient in a little room in the hospital or in the emergency room under a local anesthetic, he would have earned him $50 from Blue Cross, and the room would have cost maybe $20, and that would have been that. In countries that have nationalized medical service, an inpatient biopsy in the operating room under a general anesthesia is the last resort. In groups like Kaiser Permanente or the HIP in New York or Group Health in Washington that I know of, again, the inpatient biopsy is a rarity. It's only done if the medical situation is such that it would be an operation the woman could not watch and be awake for, or if the woman just doesn't want to be awake. But they can do 90%, it has been estimated, 90% of all biopsies could be done under a local anesthetic in a room.
But isn't it usual that a woman has a biopsy in an operating room, and if it's malignant, then immediately a mastectomy is done?
Yeah, it's usual in this country, not in other
That's not what
countries.
happened to you, though, is it?
No, it was difficult to do it the way I did it. Let me preface all this by saying that I worked at Johns Hopkins Medical School for 4 years before I was married. And this left me with two legacies. Well, I should say three. Number one, I was not afraid of doctors. And I'm still not, because you can't date a medical student and wind up being afraid of doctors. The second benefit was that I learned the medical language, which is a very foreign language. And the third was that I had a basic distrust of the frozen section, which is the fast freezing laboratory study of a piece of tissue to see if it's malignant. There were just too many jokes about the medical student who went in to have his you-know-what biopsied, and it was malignant, and they cut it off, and then whoops, the results came in 3 days later and was benign after all. And even though this doesn't happen often, it does happen. And there is a case being litigated now in California where a woman's frozen section said malignant, the breast was removed, and the pathologist, who was a friend of the family, came in later with the good news that she didn't have cancer after all. And so it does happen. And I just had this distrust of the frozen section, and I was not about to have the one-step procedure. But after doing a great deal of research in the library, I found out that there was a good medical reason not to do the biopsy and mastectomy together, because if the cancer has already spread beyond these glands or nodes in the armpit into the lung or liver or bone, the mastectomy is totally unnecessary.
Does that have any effect, if it's done and it's already spread, does that have any effect on the length of time a person lives after that?
Well, to the degree that if the woman had not undergone major surgery, and mastectomy is major surgery, they could begin chemotherapy almost immediately.
You can't begin chemotherapy immediately after a mastectomy?
Oh, no, you have to wait 6 or 8 weeks until you recover. You lose a lot of blood. And all the chemotherapies are very potent drugs. And you just don't give them on a body that has suffered this kind of surgical shock. You have to wait until the body's system gets back in order. And it's very valuable time. But why lose a breast for nothing? Why lose anything for nothing? The whole point of doing a mastectomy is to stop it before it's spread. If it's already spread, and it can be found at least 10% of the time. We don't have the technology, the scanning materials and so on, to be able to detect every spread, because if it's microscopic, we can't always find it. When I say we, I mean they, the doctors. But
you think you're a doctor by now?
Sometimes I think I know more than some of the doctors, yes. But about breast cancer, let me qualify that. 10% of them, and this year that would be 9,000 breasts, could be detected in advance. And these breasts are lost. I know of several cases where it was already in the lungs or liver, and they did a mastectomy anyhow because they didn't scan or do the staging until after the mastectomy. This is when it's usually done in the one-stage procedure. If a woman has invaded nodes, if they find several glands in the armpit are malignant, then they'll backtrack and stage, and then they'll decide what to do in the way of follow-up care.
But aside from medical reasons, there's psychological reasons.
Oh, well, that doesn't count. Don't you know we all get over that? That's what the surgeons tell me all the time.
Really?
We get over it, yeah.
I hadn't heard very many women who got over that.
Well, I think people are resilient and you can get over anything, but why? It's got to leave scars. I can't imagine, not having gone through it, I can't imagine the situation where you go to sleep and not know whether you're going to wake up with one or two, because I went to sleep knowing I was going to lose two and it was still a shock. I beg your pardon, lose one. and it was still a shock to wake up with it gone. And I was really looking forward to it because when I got into Roswell Park, my surgeon, Dr. Dow, said, now before we do any mastectomy, we've got to run these tests and see if it's anywhere else. And it took 2 days to do all those tests. And all through the 2 days, I kept thinking, gee, suppose they find out I'm inoperable. That's what it means, you're inoperable. When he came in and said that everything was clean as far as anybody could see, we had a celebration. My husband brought in a bottle, and we sat in the hospital.
So the fear becomes relative very quickly, doesn't it?
Yes, very quickly. I think that everybody has experienced that in life. What is very, very fearful one day becomes the best thing the next day. By the time they finished the staging, I was happy to hear that I was a candidate for mastectomy. That's all I can say. It may sound macabre, but that's the way it is. When a woman tells me that, and I've been told many times, that the doctor assured her it was benign, she'd be out with a Band-Aid on. One woman told me she had a dinner party for 20 scheduled, and the doctor said, don't cancel it because you'll be out, no problem. Plenty of time to cook dinner, and she woke up the next day stuffed with pipes and things. I just don't see how they bear it. They do, outwardly. You never know what goes on inside. You don't know what trauma has been left by the whole thing. And let's just talk about logistics. You've got a lot of women have little children. It's one thing to go in for a procedure that's going to take a couple of hours. It's another thing to go into the hospital for something that's going to take 10 days. You want to fill your freezer. You want to clean up your bedroom so your mother-in-law doesn't see the mess. Lots of reasons. You might want another doctor. That might be the main reason they insist on the one-stage procedure.
There's a lot of concern about this on the part of women. Is anything happening? For instance, is the National Cancer Institute and the National Institute of Mental Health, I mean, are they cooperating? Are they trying to do something about this to change the situation?
To my knowledge, the only joint effort between those two institutes is a study on whether there's any psychological component to the etiology of melanoma, which is a skin cancer. There's no joint contract. The National Cancer Institute does have 5 contracts being studied now by different institutions around the country on the psychological aspects of mastectomy. Now, this is after you've already had the mastectomy. To my knowledge, there has been no work done on the psychological trauma of the one-stage procedure. The whole business, from the moment the woman doesn't want to open the book, right up to the point where she finds a symptom, is what I call the preclinical psychological aspects, because there are many psychological aspects before you ever have a mastectomy, before you find
You're trying to do something about that, aren't you? You started an organization.
Well, I have a breast cancer advisory center that I began and is being carried on by a nurse, Mrs. Dorothy Johnston. It's a nonprofit organization. And we answer questions. We try to help out wherever we can.
Is that the point, to disseminate the information?
That's the whole thing. And to try to get more where we don't already have it. We have a medical advisory board that includes an oncologist, a psychiatrist, a clinical psychologist, and a social worker who specializes in cancer.
What kind of questions do people ask most?
The most common questions: where do I go? We have it. So if it's urgent, they'll call. Otherwise, they write. But where do I go to get the breast? Where do I find an oncologist?
Do you have an address where people might be able to write to you?
It's Box 422, Kensington, Maryland 20795, and the name is the Breast Cancer Advisory Center. And we have some information that we send out for specific questions. Mrs. Johnston answers them to the best of her ability, and if not, we get advice from the board.
Breast cancer hasn't been something that people have given a lot of money for research for a long time, has it? I mean, only since 1966 has the real big money come in for breast cancer. Why is that, Rose?
Well, I think it was because it was in the early 60s that the cause of lung cancer was discovered, and that came first because it was a male disease. But that's my judgment, and I don't know why. All I can say is that in 1966, somebody in Congress, and I've never been able to find out who, because the resolution asking for that a breast cancer task force be created was a whole bunch of names, and I don't know who the original one was, but somebody in Congress requested that $500,000 be appropriated to set up a breast cancer task force to find the cause and cure breast cancer. That was 1966. The task force finally really started rolling in 1970, and very, very slowly the budget was increased, and it's up to $9 million this year, which is no change from last year, so with inflation it's a cut. But it's better than it's been. I think that if as much money had been put into breast cancer years ago as it was put into lung cancer, they would have found the cause by now and maybe gone a long way toward finding better controls. Cure is something that I think is going to be very elusive for cancer, as it is for all these other diseases that plague us, and I don't know why there's so much emphasis on cure. I think we should concentrate more on prevention. And
is there a chance that that'll happen, that the emphasis will change?
Well, I certainly hope so. There are more and more people concerned with the carcinogens, the whole ecology movement, and the fact that it has become very evident that certain cancers are peculiar to certain populations, certain geographical areas. Certain liver cancers came out of the vinyl chloride industry, all these epidemiological factors, and that word means who, when, and where. It doesn't have anything to do with its being catching.
That is a common myth about cancer, breast cancer, isn't it?
It's very common, and it is a myth. There's no reason to believe it's catching, but people do think so. I have one person who has yet to come and visit me. My surgery was 17 months ago. She calls, she writes. She's not come to visit. That's
incredible. Rose, thank you very much for being here. It's been a pleasure, and also I'm not as frightened as I was previously now that I've read the book. Thank you for watching, and good night.
Woman was produced by WNED-TV, which is solely responsible for its content, and was funded by public television stations, the Ford Foundation, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.